ground shake. here with you. See your face in the crowd, but you don't seem so far away. Nothing between us is empty space, empty space. Even when the music is loud, I'd rather be no other place. Here with you now, here with you now. Here with you now. Here with you. Rather be no other place than here with you now. Place than here with you. I see your face in the crowd, but you don't seem so far away. Nothing between us is empty space, empty space. Even when the music is loud, I'd rather be no other place. Here with you now, here with you now.
All right, guys, we are here and just about ready to go. We are finally into the servers here to kick off step number 2. A little bit of a delay here due to some technical difficulties with the servers, but it looks like we are just about ready to go. 15 out of the 16 drivers have made their way in here. Just waiting on a few more people to get into the lobby and we'll get things started, but it's going to be an exciting one here today. Step 2, Scrapie starting it off after a 6th place finish here in the first week. So definitely not the best position, but not the worst position, right in the middle of the pack right now. He had a pretty solid end of the day, and I think now it's just about getting some early points on his side this time around. There was a couple races yesterday, or last week if you guys tuned in, where he wasn't quite able to secure the placing he was hoping for, had some last minute blunders on a couple of the tracks. But this time around, I think he's definitely going to be able to make an even bigger impact here in step number 2. Right now, though, 6th place does put him in contention for that playoff spot. Just needs to at least stay in this position or better for the remainder of the season. And he should be in a pretty good place here. And I think going into today, he's put a lot of attention on that 6th track. It seemed to play in his favor to really put in a lot of the practice on that last couple of tracks going into last week. And I think a lot of drivers, that's really their mentality right now, is what they can do in those last 2 tracks. Because as we saw, in the first week even, there was quite a few drivers who in that last race of the day lost all of their points. I think the most notable was Pack, who had 82 points going into that final track and lost all of them. And I think he ended up finishing the day still in the back 8. So it just goes to show you how important those final 2 tracks of the day really are, because you can have an amazing day, win all of the first 4 races, but in reality, if you have a bad performance in those final 2 tracks, the first 4 essentially become meaningless on your day's performance. So hopefully there's nothing like that in store for Scrapie here today. I think his focus is really on those last 2 tracks, and if he happens to accumulate some extra points from the earlier portion of the day, I think he'll be happy. But we're going to hop in here, guys, as everybody's kind of getting warmed up here on the track as they await the next couple of players here to join, and we should be underway in just a few short moments. Only one driver left waiting to connect here. If you guys are wondering, though, it is going to be just the second week here. For a lot of these drivers, there's still a lot of time to recover. Scrapie, though, still not in a bad spot. I know he said after I talked to him at the end of last week, he was hoping to get a little bit more in terms of points on the overall day, but he was still pretty pleased with his ability to close it out on that final track with a decent placement. So all in all, not a bad spot for Scrapie, but still, he definitely needs to have a bigger day overall, and he is very aware of his overall positioning right now, and needing that big 50-point day is going to be a tall order to fill, I think, this season. There's a lot of difficult tracks here. I would say overall, the map pool does seem to be a little bit more challenging. I think there's a lot more room for error on many of these maps, but today, I think more than ever is going to be a big test for Scrapie, since judging by the way he's practiced, I think the final map of today will play in his favor quite a bit. So we'll see exactly how it all pans out. But before we hop into it too deep here, guys, a quick shout out to our partners Logitech G and XP Sports. Be sure to show them some love, as they are incredible supporters for what we do here for Scrapie and Trackmania. So we are just waiting a few moments, though. Like I said, we had some technical difficulties with the servers, so they've gone ahead and decided on a 15 after the hour start time here instead of the usual 8 o'clock start time. So we'll see if we're going to, in fact, get started around that time. I'm not sure what the last driver is having issues with here, but everybody else has been in the warm-up server for a bit here now, so everybody's just about ready to go. But it's a good moment for Scrapie, kind of practicing through this map and preparing himself for what's to come here. I believe this track will be either the 4th or 5th in the rotation today that they're on right now in the practice server. As you can see, though, Scrapie getting a lot of good practice in right now. A lot of the other drivers doing the same here. Just taking a peek here at some of the other drivers on the field. We've got Bren here, getting some good practice in as well. Link seems to be away. Mutta, though, another guy I would keep my eyes on this season. He was one of the the up-and-comers from the Challenger League, so he fought his way in, and in those relegations, he was one of the drivers to really look out for, so I definitely expect him to make quite the statement his first season in the TMGL here. Right now, though, everybody just getting warmed up here for step number 2. Taking a look at Pack here real quick, who we were just talking about, had that 82-point day come crashing down in the final track, and for him, he's definitely going to be someone I would say is going to put a lot more attention on those final maps today. Losing 82 points in just one race is probably a pretty devastating way to go down there, and you had a couple other drivers as well close out with some poor performances in that final race and lose all of their points, but actually I think Carl Jr. closed out the day on top, so I think that's what Carl has going for him. He seems to be one of the more consistent drivers when it matters. Even though he's not always winning races, he consistently finds his way into the top 8, and that's where I think in the regular season Carl's going to be a big threat to a lot of these drivers here. He just seems to be always in that top 8, right where he wants to be, and not necessarily winning all the races, but for him it doesn't matter. He's able to hold on to his points, and every week he's able to do that, just puts him further and further out in front. We still are just waiting a few moments here. A couple drivers still trying to get in the lobby here. If you guys are hanging out in the chat, though, appreciate everybody tuning in here this weekend for step number 2. Be sure to follow the channel here. If you guys haven't, we'll be here every weekend of the TMGL to provide you coverage from the point of view of our driver here, Scrapie. As we can see here, Gwen getting in some good practice, but having some issues with the checkpoint here. Scrapie back from a quick moment away here. Rocking the new 2021 car design here. I definitely like this one a lot better than our 2020 design, and I think it's going to be a nice one to see cross the finish line today with some good placements. Overall, though, I think it's going to be an interesting day. I'd love to know what you guys think. Who do you think is going to have a strong day here in step number 2? Is it going to be Carl Jr. winning the day again? Or will Scrapie find his way into an even better placement at the end of the day? I think Scrapie, for him, if he had had some better early races, he actually would have closed out with quite a few points, but unfortunately just didn't have too much momentum earlier on in the day last week. So it is about 16 after here, guys. We're still in warm-up mode, which means not all of the drivers have yet connected into the lobby here. I think there was just quite a few issues from the Ubisoft client with people getting on today, so just a few delays, but hopefully we'll still get things underway shortly. I'm not sure which is the odd driver out here that hasn't been able to make it into the server, but for the most part, everybody else is here, so... So we can see Yvonne here from Team Secret, getting some good practice in with Bren and Arl as well. It's going to be interesting to see, though, exactly who can have a strong day. I've heard a lot of people say Pack is going to have a pretty strong day. It would make sense, though, for Pack to have a good day here. I mean, last week he had 82 points going into the final race. If he had been able to close that day out, there was a chance he pulled off an 100-point day, which would have been a huge statement for him. Unfortunately, just that last map causing him a lot of struggles, but I definitely see him as a driver that if he can close out a strong day, could put up some big numbers for himself on the overall standings. It does look like we're going to load back in and actually prepare the full warm-up for the lobby, so we may get a chance to hop into the races shortly here after all, guys, but appreciate everybody tuning in despite some of the delays we've had on the technical side with the server here today. Looks like we are going to be hopping into a new map here. Still in warm-up mode, though. We'll see exactly what's in store right now. Everybody kind of just waiting on the final player to join the server, and then we'll be quickly into it. It looks like 2 players are actually disconnected now as well, so I'm not sure if that means additional problems or if it is going to be some sort of greater technical difficulty preventing them from getting in. Nonetheless, though, we'll hop on with Scrapie, see if he's going to get a little bit of practice in here on some of the additional tracks while everybody's waiting. And I believe the track we're seeing right now is going to be the final track of the day, if I recall correctly as well. So this is a good one to keep your eyes on in the warm-up right here, because this is going to be the make it or break it track for a lot of drivers today, because this is one where I would say there's not necessarily a ton of room for error, but there is a lot of room for time to be gained and lost here in terms of just the overall speed you need to maintain around these corners here. So it's definitely not the hardest track, but it's one where you're going to see a lot of heavy implications on the standings today, since it should be the final track coming up in this step. So as you can see, a lot of drivers getting that practice on it, since they know this is going to be one of the key tracks here today. Hopping in with Scrapie here, though, getting some practice of his own. We'll see how he's prepared for this one. Scrapie, always a driver, too, where we've always seen him take a little bit of a different approach than a lot of the other drivers. He's not afraid to make some of those minor adjustments and try new things out before the rest of the pack here. And we'll see if that can play to his advantage here in step number 2. Still waiting on 2 drivers, though, to connect to the lobby here, guys. If you're just tuning in, just a little bit of pause coming out here while we wait for the final 2 drivers to connect. Not sure if it's technical difficulties or what exactly the issue might be on their end, but we should be started in just a few short moments. Right now, though, hopping on with Scrapie, putting in the warm-up work here, just getting ready for the day. As you can see, definitely a track here where he's put in a lot of time and practice to prepare for this week. This will be one of the key maps today, and one where Scrapie could potentially make a move into the top 4. He's not too far off of it realistically, but he's going to have to accumulate a bit more on his points total throughout the day, because 6th place is not necessarily the safest place to be, especially considering he didn't quite get a large number of points on the table even with that 6th place finish. There's going to be a lot more that he wanted to get done on the overall performance in last week. So definitely looking for, I would say, at least 20-25 points out of this week, if not more, to keep himself in a strong position. Right now, though, a lot of the early prep here going to be in line for Scrapie. He seems just about ready to go. A lot of these drivers, I'm sure, are, though. We're about 21 minutes late to the start here, just due to some technical difficulties on the Ubisoft server. So we're just waiting on a couple other drivers to get in here, and we should be able to get this one started. I believe going into today, though, Carl Jr. is going to be the driver to beat, currently out in 1st place as well. He's got to be feeling pretty confident going into this season as well, with a very strong finish last season as well. And he's just one of those drivers that seems to be very, very consistent throughout. So I would definitely keep my eyes on him, as well as Pack here. Had a great start to his day last week. So we can see here, Tween, though, going to be getting some good prep in as well. A lot of these drivers, though, just trying to stay warmed up, ready to go for when things do ultimately kick off here. But looks like we do have another driver who's made it back in, just waiting on one now, and then we should be ready to kick things off. As you can see though, everybody in the lobby, aside from one driver here, just waiting on that last person to get connected. And in the meantime, just seeing some of the warm-up here on one of the crucial maps for the day. Scrapie though, looking pretty smooth overall on it. The last few turns were a little bit shaky for him in a couple of these warm-up laps, but he's definitely put in the work here in preparation for today. He seems confident and ready to go. And just looking at this warm-up lap so far, looks pretty clean, to be honest. If he can bring this kind of momentum into the live match here, I think he'll be in a good spot. As you can see, this midsection right here can offer a lot of difficulty if you cut just a bit too sharp around these corners. Can ultimately impact your time greatly, but Scrapie putting in work on that lap. It's going to be interesting to see how everyone approaches this track, though. I can see it being one that looks a lot easier than it plays out. As you can see, one little bump there can be a world of difference, where this track you really need momentum on your side, since it's a very high-speed track, and just one little bump like that could ultimately cost you 4 or 5 positions in the live race. So definitely good to kind of iron things out now and get some last-minute prep in, just to make sure he's ready to go. If you guys missed last week, though, Scrapie did finish 6th place overall. It's going to be up to him to see if he can climb a little bit further today. Obviously, if you guys tuned in last season as well, he wasn't quite able to secure a spot in the top 8 for that playoff section. So that's really the goal for him this time coming into the new season here for 2021, is to ultimately secure that top 8 and see if he can take it all the way this time around. Right now, though, we are still waiting on one last driver to make their way into the servers. If you guys are just tuning in, we are running on a little bit of a late start due to some technical difficulties on the Ubisoft servers, but we're still planning on getting things underway here in just a few moments as soon as everybody gets connected to the lobby, and then we'll be ready to go. Quick shout out as well to our partners here, Logitech G and XP Sports. If you guys are hanging out in the chat, be sure to check them both out and show them some love for being amazing supporters of what we're able to do in Trackmania here this year. Right now, though, we'll hop back on with Scrapie, who's just taking a moment here, going through and practicing the tracks in order to stay warmed up for the day. It's going to be a big day for him if he can close out with a confident 20 to 30 points. That should potentially move him into the top 4, depending on how the rest of these drivers do, but he may need even a little bit more than that to do so, as there are a few drivers that have a very comfortable week 1 point total to work with. Another driver, though, that I definitely look out for this season is Spammy J. I think he's had a lot of momentum on his side from last season as well. I think he's one of those drivers that he doesn't always have the consistency to get the job done, but he's definitely someone I've seen have a lot of impact in the past, and someone I'm definitely going to be keeping my eyes on here in this season. Kappa as well, now racing for the McLaren Shadow team. Interested to see what he'll do under that new banner here as well. Another driver that's had a little bit of a hit and miss in terms of performance, but definitely someone I could see making it through to the top 8. Looks like everybody's kind of calmed down in the warm-ups now. They're just trying to figure out if there's going to be any further delays here. I do apologize for that, guys. I'm not sure what the technical issue is in waiting here for this last person to hop in the servers, but it looks like just as I say that, there is going to be a 16th member joining the server. Now everybody looks to be in the server and ready to go here, so we should be getting started in just a moment. Papu is now in the server. Everybody seems to be ready to go. We should be kicking it off in just a moment here. It's going to be an interesting one, though, to see what exactly everybody has in store for us in Step 2. This is where the points are really going to be a strong implication. I think Week 1, everybody was kind of just sort of shaking off the nerves of the season, but now, Step 2, everybody, especially those not in the top 8, are really going to have a big performance here if they want to stay in contention for a top 8 spot at the end of all the steps here. So yes, guys, there are 16 players in, but we are still waiting on a couple of the broadcasters who are having some issues getting in here. I believe there's still 2 or 3 broadcasters that aren't in the server yet, but all the players are here and ready to go. So I'm not sure how long they'll give in terms of additional time to get the rest of the broadcasters in, but hopefully everybody will be in here soon and we can get this one rolling. If you guys are hanging out, though, let me know what you think. Where's Scrapie going to place today? I'm curious to see your thoughts on where you might see him placing at the end of today. My gut kind of says I think actually somewhere around the same. If I had to guess, to be honest, I think he'll still be around the 5 through 8 overall. I would say that's a pretty fair place to put him at the end of the day. I think for him, especially with the way he approaches the game and how he's eyeing these final 2 maps a little bit more than the rest, I would say having him kind of hold around that 6th place position would not surprise me, or maybe even a little bump up into 4th or 5th as well. For Scrapie, though, I think the biggest thing I want to watch for him is he's had so many races from just looking at the last season and even the first week of this one where he's just had one small thing cost him quite a bit on a couple of these tracks. And, you know, if he's able to eliminate just a few of those issues, I think he could really be one of those drivers that pushes way out in front here. So it just comes down to a few small things. If he can fix those, I think he'll be in a really good position to have a very strong closeout to this season. And Scrapie's a driver who historically has done quite well. I mean, he's had multiple top 4 finishes in his past. He just didn't have quite the finish to the last season of TMGL that he was hoping for. So this time around, I'd expect definitely a top 8 out of him and potentially even more beyond that. So right now, though, we are just waiting on a few of the other broadcasters to hop into the server. We did have a bit of a tech delay at the start of the day, but it looks like we are just about ready to go, as all the drivers are in now, just waiting on a few of these broadcasters, and then we'll be kicking things off here. Right now, though, a lot of the pressure going to be felt by these drivers in the back 8 to kick off today. Many of these drivers looking to have a much stronger placement. Pack, specifically, we talked about with having a big points total taken away from him at the end of the first step there. But a lot of these drivers still looking to prove themselves as well. Papu now in the server. We'll see what he can do as well. He's a driver that definitely surprised me a lot in the previous season with some strong performances. A lot of these drivers, though, definitely have a bit to prove here. Link, another driver to keep your eyes on. Another up-and-comer here. If you guys are just tuning in, though, we should be starting in just a few moments here. All of the drivers are just getting a little bit of warm-up time in while the broadcasters get ready to go. So we hop on once again with Scrapie here, getting some nice warm-up in. This is one of the tracks, too, he had a pretty strong performance overall on, in terms of lap times here in the previous steps, so I definitely expect him to have a strong one here as well. Scrapie, though, looking pretty clean here in the warm-up. Just a few minor issues in some of the lap times. If you guys are hanging out in the channel as well, be sure to give it a follow to show some support there for Scrapie, and of course we'll be here every week for each and every step of the TMGL season with you as well. Looks like we are ready to start here, guys. The wait is over. It is time to go and get these 6 races of the day started. Got just about a minute and a half of warm-up time, and then we will be into it here for this first track of the day. It's going to be Gap Jumper to kick us off here for the day. Scrapie definitely eager to get this one going and start off on the right foot here, but as we've said throughout, the last 2 tracks of the day are really what it all leads up to here. You can have a great start or a poor start to the day, but those last 2 tracks are where you will really be able to prove what you're able to get done here on the steps. So right now it is going to be Scrapie just getting some nice warm-up time here as they get ready to go, just about 40 seconds away from kicking this one off. And all of the drivers, I'm sure, are eager to get this one underway today. Going into today as well, Carl Jr., the current points leader, but still early enough on in the season here where there's definitely ample time for all of the drivers to recover. All right, here we go. It's going to be the kickoff, guys, of our first track of the day. Gap Jumper, 6 laps for these drivers to try and find their way to victory. And we'll see who can start off the day with a nice race win. All right, here we go, right around the first corners here. It is going to be Scrapie off to an early front of the pack position, but still not comfortably enough to know where he'll stand just yet. A little bit of delay around the second turn there. Pushes him back to around that 10th position, but still everybody neck and neck here so far on Gap Jumper. Going into the first couple of jumps here, Scrapie does fall a tad behind the middle of the pack, but definitely within striking distance still. Rounding out the next few turns, it is going to be Scrapie kind of securing his place right around 14th for the moment, but now going into the next lap, we'll see what they can do. Hopping on for a moment here with the current leader, Gwen. He is going to be fighting pack for that #1 spot. It's going to be Scrapie currently in an unfortunate position, sitting towards the back of the pack here on track #1 for the day. Gwen, though, currently in a nice lead position. We'll see if they can find their way back towards the front of the pack here with Scrapie and Kappa kind of fighting from behind in this first race. Scrapie, though, starting to make a little bit of a recovery, but not quite enough to make that lasting impact just yet. As we can see, though, About a second between Scrapie and Papu here. We'll see exactly what's in store for Scrapie to potentially close this one out with a little bit of a stronger placement. It looks like one of the drivers potentially went down and out there. Kappa having a lot of trouble, 8 seconds behind so far. And as we hop in real quick with the middle of the pack, it's going to be Gwen still out in front. Spammy J not too far behind him. Carl Jr. rounding out the top 3. Scrapie, though, on the move. Now works his way into 13th as Massa did go down and out there on the last turn along with Yvonne. Scrapie, though, still just trying to get a little bit more potential points here on the table. Not really a race there where he can be too concerned, though, compared to what's to come. There's no points to be lost in this one, only points to be gained. So realistically, if you're going to have a bottom 8 race, the first one of the day isn't necessarily a bad option for that. As you can see, Scrapie's still recovering some of that time as well, going around the first few turns here. As we can see, it is going to be Carl Jr. picking up that leader position. We are on lap 4 out of 6 as well now. Scrapie working his way up the pack as well. It's going to be 11th place now for him after a 15th start. Not necessarily a bad spot to be, potentially in striking distance for a top 10, maybe even a top 8 finish if he can continue to recover time around these last 3 laps. For Scrapie, though, just accumulating points where he can throughout the opening 4 maps is really the priority. And more importantly, the last 2 of the day, being in the top 8, is where everybody's mind has to be at here with the points format. So for Scrapie, I'm sure he may have liked a little bit of a better placement here, but overall I don't think he's going to be too disappointed regardless of where he goes down here in race number 1, since his preparation has really been for these final 2 maps of the day. Scrapie, though, still making a good effort to catch up here with Papu in that 10th position. Not too far away from that potential. Starting to get closer and closer to the middle of the pack here. Definitely having a good time around these last couple of turns. Still just about a 1.5 seconds off of that 10th position. We'll see if the recovery's in store here as we are on lap 5 out of 6. Only 2 laps here to make it happen. Tween, you can see there, a bit of a spin out. Fortunately so. Scrapie's still trying to make that effort to catch up to Papu here. He's got it down to just about a second now, so he is recovering that time nicely. But the question is, how much longer does he have to actually recover this one? Only about a lap and a half remaining here to try and get the job done in the potential pass here. And this may be the moment to do it here on the downturn. As you can see, each and every moment is just time chipped away here from Papu. The middle of the pack here is so close to being within striking distance, but we are on the final lap now as well. So Scrapie, this is really his moment to try and find a chance to be impactful here. Papu, though, hits the wall. That's going to be a pass for Scrapie. Now a top 10 position. Looking for the potential to even catch up to Affy here in the final lap. Looking very clean in this last lap so far. Affy, I believe, is losing a little bit of speed here as well. Still over a second away, so Scrapie, unless somebody makes a mistake, I don't see another pass going his way to close this one out for the first race of the day, but still, 10th place, not a bad position to be in considering how this one started. See over the wide turn here. Things looking good here for Scrapie to close it out. And he actually gets a pass there. Someone had a mistake going into the final checkpoint there. I believe someone may have hit the wall. So it will be 9th place for Scrapie to kick off the day. all in all, not a bad finish considering he did start out in that 15th position. So he recovered nicely, moved up to 9th, and now has a nice little points buffer on his side to start working with for the day. So definitely a good way to kick things off. Not quite a top 8 though, but still he will pick up 5 points for his work there on that map and start the day off in 9th. Spammy J able to win that first one though, 22 points for him. Carl Jr. able to pick up that second spot, and it is going to be Pack rounding out that top 3. So definitely no major surprises there in the top 3, and it looks like Bren took a pretty hard spin out there at the last minute, and he fell down into the bottom 8, and I believe he was in the top 6 for a good chunk of that race. So unfortunate timing for him, but all we can do is look ahead now, as this is where we go forward with the momentum for all of these drivers. It's going to be Scrapie right in the middle of the pack here to start off the day. Race number 2 going to be Wade. I would say roughly the same for a lot of these drivers as the first map of the day. There's no heavy risk in being in the bottom 8 in the second race. It doesn't start to come until you get later on in the day here. So still, this is just another race for drivers to grab points and then hopefully hold on to them as the day progresses. We've got another 90 seconds of warm-up here, though. Our second map will be Leap of Faith here today to keep the ball rolling. Before we get into it, though, a quick shout-out to our partners, Logitech G and XP Sports. Be sure to check them out and show some love and support for those guys, as they've been incredible in supporting us throughout the season here as well. Right now, though, it is going to be the second map of step number 2 here, just about to get underway. And we'll see what Scrapie can do to maybe make some improvements here on this second track of the day. Not necessarily one where there's going to be a lot of pressure, though, on these drivers to perform. It's more just looking towards the end of the day and keeping the momentum on your side and just keeping that confidence high. Scrapie, though, currently tied for 9th place, 5 points on the day. Nobody feeling too comfortable just yet, because in this points format, you've got to be on your toes here. One bad race is all it takes for the day to be a complete wipe. Going into Leap of Faith, though, definitely an interesting map for sure. I think this is one that offers a lot of potential for mistakes here out of the drivers, and this is one where I can see many of the drivers potentially having one mistake cost them a ton of placement here. And here we go, right into it, race number 2. Let's see how Scrapie can do here. Starting this one off, though, it is going to be very early lead for Scrapie, but still very close, as you can see, amongst the top of the pack here. Scrapie, though, continuing to make his presence known out in front early. A nice start here so far. All of these drivers kind of neck and neck, though, amongst the top 8. Going around the first big turn here, it is going to be Scrapie still fighting for that spot out in front. As you can see, though, Papu kind of getting the best of it there. Starting to pull a little bit ahead, but Scrapie still maintaining his position here in the middle of the pack. Going around the next few turns, it is going to be Papu and Mutta out in front. Scrapie still right around that 8th position. Going into the jumps here, going to have to be a little bit cautious, but seems to land it pretty well on the first go. As you can see, though, a lot of these sharp turns seeming to push Scrapie a little bit behind here compared to the middle of the pack. See if he can find a way to recover here right now. Just needs to find a little bit of trim on his lap time, and he should be able to recover quite well here. Scrapie's one of those drivers that's not really too scared of making an adjustment on the fly if he sees the impact potential of it. As you can see, already some slight adjustments here going into lap number 2. Scrapie moving from 11th quickly back towards that top 8. You can see the momentum in this lap definitely on his side, making 3 passes already. Looking for the 4th one here on to Tween. Scrapie, though, that is a bump on the wall. That one's going to hurt a bit. Knocks him down to right around that 12th position. Now going into the leap here, he's going to have to hope for some recovery here. Still manages to make the jump, so that's a bit of a breath of fresh air. And honestly, if you were going to have an error, that's kind of the time to make it, because he has that speed boost to help him recover a little bit faster. So not necessarily the worst timing on that, but it does cost him about 5 positions to recover, but all very close ones within striking distance. Yvonne, though, gets the additional pass as well. Scrapie loses some speed around the last couple of turns here, unfortunately so, putting himself in a very difficult position now for the remainder of the race. As we can see here, though, some recovery in store potentially here for Scrapie. He does have some good lap times here. It's just been a few minor errors costing him his overall position on this race. As we can see, though, Scrapie looking for the pass here around the turn. He's going to get a triple pass here so far, and he's still looking for more here. Not a bad way to keep the ball rolling. Going into the leap here. We'll see if he can find some additional passes. So far, though, definitely a lot of neck and neck here, losing a little bit of that pass ground he gained on the turns, pushing himself back into 15th actually here. So all of that ground gained has been a little bit lost here. But still, only on 4 out of 6, so 3 laps to recover for this one. We'll see if he can find a way to do it right now. Scrapie just trying to chip away at the lead and see what he can do. Not necessarily a map, though, that has a lot of implications on the overall performance for the day. Still just another one where you could see that potential climb up the leaderboard. You can see Bren there, though, again having a bit of a blunder here on this map as well. He's going to be a little bit frustrated after the first 2 maps here. Right now, Kappa out in front, though. Papu in second place. Carl Jr. rounding out the top 3 as usual. Mudda not too far behind them. Scrapie, though, starting to make a little bit of a swing here. Has a bit of an overstretch on that last jump, though, and doesn't quite manage to keep his momentum. As we can see here, though, Scrapie still trying to claw back up the leaderboards in these final 2 laps. Very close to a potential pass here onto Yvonne and then Link. It's going to be one pass there onto Yvonne. Now Link very close within potential pass as well. You can see the middle of the pack here, very, very close amongst each other. Scrapie looking for any glimpse of recovery on his overall placement here in race number 2. Just looking for some extra points to potentially hold on to today. This is where the pass potential is strong for Scrapie. He definitely has a lot of momentum in this section to go his way. Link very, very close to being passed here. Scrapie making great time around the initial turns here on this 5 out of 6 lap, almost to the finish line here. And here we go, final lap, makes the pass onto Link to kick it off in 11th position. Arl and Gwen very close. Link, though, able to turn right back around and get the pass. Rialu very close to the pass as well. Bren neck and neck here, very, very close set of drivers here in the 10 to 14 position. Scrapie, though, on the turn, tries to cut inside and get the pass going his way. And it may just be enough to get the job done here, but coming around a little bit wide, it's going to be Bren and Link who pass him right back. Scrapie still looking for that last-minute recovery potential here in the final lap. Gwen losing a little bit of time as well, becomes a passable position here as well. Scrapie still neck and neck between Link and Bren. Gwen very close, and Arl even close as well now. Things are very, very neck and neck going into the final few turns here. It's all about how Scrapie can approach this final set of turns, still neck and neck, and it's going to be an 11th place finish, I believe, to close it out, maybe 12th. I think Bren actually got the pass onto him at just the last moment there, so it will be a 12th position finish for Scrapie. Not quite what he was hoping for here on this one, but he's still able to manage a few extra points on the table. So that is where we'll be for now. Scrapie only able to pick up 4 points on this one. All in all, not necessarily the worst spot to be in. Currently going to be tied for 11th as we go into race number 3. But now it's a matter of picking up the pace, as this is when things start to heat up a little bit in race number 3. And of course, as the day progresses, it's only going to be harsher and harsher in terms of what happens to your points. So this is where every driver really needs to step it up a notch in races 3 and 4, and then 5 and 6, it's really go hard or go home in those last 2 races of the day. So it's really up to Scrapie now at this point to show us what he's got. The first 2 races just kind of being almost a little bit of a warm-up for these drivers to get comfortable before they go into the tough part of their day. So we're going to be hopping in shortly here for track number 3 of the day. Scrapie definitely looking a little bit stronger earlier on in the day than what we saw in the first step. I believe he had 2 bottom 3s to kick off the day in the previous step. So I think he's already done a little bit more than what we saw at the start of last week. But still, it's going to be a tough one here as we go into bookcase for track number 3 of the day, race 3 as well. We'll see what Scrapie has in store for us here. Will it be the first top 8 for him of the day? He only had 1 top 8, I believe, go his way last week. Maybe 2 top 8s out of the whole 6 races. So it's not the best position to be in overall for Scrapie right now, but as we can see, there's nobody out in a crazy lead just yet. So 1 good race plus holding on to those points is all Scrapie really needs today. Bookcase, this is one of the tracks we saw Scrapie do really well on in the previous week, and I think it's just the way he approaches this track gives him a lot of advantages because he takes a different approach than I've seen a lot of these drivers do, and he just seems to be a bit more comfortable on it compared to some of the other maps. And we saw last week this is really the big impact map for him, so we'll see if he can do it once again here in step number 2, but definitely I can see Scrapie with some strong potential going into bookcase for our 3rd track of the day. As we saw in the previous week as well, he was able to pick up a lot of time here, and I think his lap times are just a little bit stronger than the majority of the pack here, and I think that goes to be in a big advantage because even if he has a small mistake or 2 with the lap times he's able to put up here, he could definitely have a big finish for himself. But here we go, bookcase track number 3 for the day. Let's get this one underway. Starting it off, it's going to be Scrapie out in the front of the pack here. A very close-knit fight, though, amongst the top 8 to start it off. Scrapie looking very comfortable around the first few turns here, but nobody's too cozy just yet. As we can see, it's going to be Bren going for the sharp turn to get out in front. May have cost him a bit of momentum, though. Scrapie just trying to sit comfortably at the start of this track. He knows that midsection is where he's going to thrive here, and keeping your eyes on Scrapie as we go into it here, this is where he's going to be able to make a lot of the impact. I think he's very clean normally throughout this section, has a lot that usually goes his way, and he's usually able to recover a lot of time with how he approaches that turn. And overall, it's going to put him in a decent position at the start of this race. Not quite comfortable enough just yet, but he's going to be kicking it out into 5th place to start this one off. As you can see, keeping that momentum around those turns as well puts him in a good position as we go into lap number 2. Scrapie now looking to move into 4th place as he does get the pass there on to Spammy J. So Scrapie already off to a good start here on track number 3. Now just needs to hold on to it. So we can see a couple drivers going in for the pass here, but nobody fully successful just yet. Rialu right out in front of him. Gwen very close behind as well, looking for a potential pass of his own. Going into the jump section though, we'll see if Scrapie can keep it clean again. First jump looks good, second jump very clean as well. Going into the downturn here, it's going to be a little shaky, but he still comes out fairly smooth. And this is where you're going to see Scrapie, I think, have a lot of advantages here. He's able to keep a lot more momentum than many of the drivers here in that section, and that can ultimately create a huge time gap here between himself and the rest of the pack here. You can see Carl Jr., Pack, and Gwen out in the top three. Scrapie just behind Gwen here, fighting for that third position. Currently on lap 3 out of 6. Scrapie with no major errors just yet. He needs to keep it clean though and maintain this consistency throughout. You can see here Gwen starting to pull closer to Pack in that second position. Scrapie losing just a little bit of time around the last couple of turns, but starting to make some headway on catching back up. Going into the jump section here, this is where you have to be clean. It's not as easy as it looks here to consistently hit both of these jumps and the downturn to perfection, but these drivers definitely make this one look much easier than it is in reality here. As you can see, Scrapie on the downturn this time around does get passed by Massa. The Pack out in front did lose some time, so ultimately Scrapie moves down one position into 5th out of the jump section here, but still it's not too far off that first position. Pack starting to pull into the lead though. Carl Jr. going to fall and get passed by Gwen as well. Still a tight-knit race across the top 6. Mutta trying to get that momentum to gain a pass here on to Scrapie. Massa though, very close to being passed by Scrapie as well here. Currently on lap 4 out of 6. Pack in the lead. Carl Jr. though gets the pass on to Gwen, and he's looking for more here as we go into the jump section once again. Scrapie keeping it clean across the board here. And Gwen failing pretty hard there on that jump, and he's going to go way down into the back 8 here. Unfortunate for Gwen, but definitely a fortunate one for Scrapie here. He was a little bit shaky on the jump, but not quite bad enough to lose a position out of it. And here we have it, Scrapie currently in 4th place. 2 laps to go, looking for the pass here on to Mutta as well. And there is ample opportunity for a top 3 finish in this one for Scrapie. As you can see, Scrapie's momentum around the last couple of turns gives him the potential to pass here on to Mutta, which he will do, currently overtaking that 3rd position. Carl Jr. in the hunt here as well, takes over onto Mutta just after Scrapie there. But now Massa potentially to give up his position to Scrapie here, but it's all about the jump section still. All of these drivers need to keep it clean here because one mistake on the jump section is going to cost you a lot more than just a single pass. Going into the downturn though, it's going to be Scrapie keeping it clean. Massa though very shaky, and now this is Scrapie with a chance to hang in the top 3 pretty comfortably. Carl Jr. gets the pass though, looks a little bit shaky around the finish line going into the final lap here. It's going to be a very close race between Carl, Pack, and Scrapie for that top 3. It's going to be a very close finish on this one indeed, but Scrapie, it's got to be in the back of his mind here. He's had so many lap number 6s result in an error that I think for Scrapie, instead of focusing on a potential win here, it's all about just keeping it clean and making sure he keeps a good position and has no major mistakes on the jump section here. I think for Scrapie, that's the most important thing he can do right now. Sure, it would be nice to win the race, but at the end of the day, maintaining the top 3 and not falling out of that top 8 is going to be even more important here in the overall points standings. Going into the final jump section, though, it is going to be Scrapie clean on the first, Scrapie clean on the second, going into the downturn, keeping momentum on his side. He's able to make it very clean here on this one as well. Most of the hard work being done here. Now he just has to clean it up around the finish line, and that will be it. Scrapie with a 3rd place finish here on Bookcase. Definitely a confident finish for himself here And a big one at that. Very nicely done. Scrapie going to pick up some major points here. And as you can see, the points leader, Spammy J, falls and loses half of his points, along with Kappa, who's going to lose half of 22. And that will put Carl Jr. and Pack out in front. But now Scrapie going to make a big jump after this last race with 12 points gained. And there you have it. Scrapie halfway in the day will be sitting in 5th place overall with a nice finish on Bookcase. It's not over just yet, though. We are quickly approaching very closely to the Danger Zone races, where everything is on the line. But before that, we've got one more that's going to be a half points here before we get into the potentially devastating maps for some of these drivers on the day. Right now, though, we are going to prepare for race number 4 coming up in just a few short moments. Guys, we appreciate everybody tuning in, though, here today and showing their support for Scrapie. Be sure to follow the channel if you guys haven't. And a big shout out as well to our partners, Logitech G and XP Sports. If you guys want to check out xpsports.com, you can use code Scrapie as well for a nice little discount off your first purchase. So be sure to show Scrapie some support and use that code for some nice XP Sports for yourself. Right now, though, it's going to be Bicycle for our next map of the day. Race number 4 out of the 6 here in step number 2. Scrapie currently not in too bad of a position, 5th place overall on the day. If he can just keep these points and have top 8s for the final 3, he will be in a very strong position to close out the week. But as we all know, keeping yourself in the top 8 for 3 races in a row is a lot easier said than done here. So Scrapie definitely has his work cut out for him, as they are 3 very difficult tracks to close out the day this week as well. If you guys are hanging out, though, I'd love to hear your predictions here for where Scrapie might place on Bicycle. Do you guys think this is going to be a good map for him, or do you think it'll be one where he maybe struggles to keep into that top 8 of the pack? Right now, though, just with about 30 seconds of warm-up before we go into Bicycle, our 4th of 6 tracks on the day. This is one where we've seen some drivers have a bit of trouble, Scrapie included. This was one where he was a bit inconsistent lap to lap here in his previous showing, but it was also one of those maps that if he eliminated those minor mistakes, he could have actually had a really, really good time. So I think Bicycle, a map where Scrapie, honestly, if he keeps confident here, could have a great finish today. All right, here we go. The bottom 8 once again here on race number 4 will be losing half of their points, so definitely a dangerous spot to be. Not quite as dangerous as it will be by the end of the day here, but nonetheless, especially in Scrapie's position, losing half of your points, not where you want to be right now. Starting this one off, though, Scrapie off to a pretty confident early position here, going to be right around the top 3. Very nice start indeed. As you can see, though, each and every turn going to matter here. Scrapie losing a little bit of ground here around the last few turns, moving into about 5th. As you can see, Scrapie takes that jump a little bit higher than the majority of the pack, but it actually doesn't punish him too badly here. In fact, Scrapie looking for a potential striking distance of that 2nd position here, going out of the icy turns. Scrapie currently trying to catapult into the lead here, and he grabs it for just a moment. But it is a quick battle between himself and Tween, with now Gwen and Bren here joining that fight for a very aggressive top 4 battle. Tween, though, holds the lead for just a moment. Gwen, though, able to just barely slide into it for now. Still a very close battle amongst the top 3 here. Massa now moving into this fight as well. It's basically a 5-way battle now for that 1st place position. Gwen still barely hanging on to it. Papu and Massa trying to overtake Scrapie around the last few corners here. Scrapie going to gain some momentum, though, on the drop down there. Papu a little bit shaky, loses some ground, but still manages to hold on to the lead. Around the last turn, though, it's going to be Gwen with the pass into first. Now Gwen and Scrapie fighting between first and second here. Papu still in this fight as well. Scrapie, though, looking very clean around the ice turns here. Actually catapults himself into first place position with 2 very clean turns. Very nicely done there from Scrapie. And you can see just in those turns on the ice, he was able to gain almost a half second of time, looking very pristine around the corners here. Gwen, though, starting to pick up the momentum, gets the pass back onto him. The fight amongst the top 3 still very fierce here, as now Arl has found his way into the mix. Scrapie, though, still in the top 3 here, fighting to try and gain that first place position back from Gwen. Arl, though, grabs the pass. Papu, though, getting the pass here as well. Scrapie falling into about 4th. We'll see if he can find a way to pick up the pace. Mutta comes in for the pass as well here. It is going to be Scrapie still keeping it very close, and now going into these icy turns once again. We'll see if Scrapie can find his momentum, because this seems to be a section where he's had a lot of success today so far. And as you can see, coming out of the ice turns, again, it's going to be Scrapie gaining just about a quarter second of time and potentially a pass into the lead again. This is where Scrapie has put himself in a great position. The way he approaches those icy banks is really just found himself so much extra time to play with here on this track. As you can see, he cleans up the rest of the track this time around as well in lap number 4, and he's going to gain the lead once again. Scrapie in a pretty comfortable position so far. If he can keep it this clean, it could be a potential win on the race here for Scrapie. Looking very good on Bicycle so far. As you can see here, Gwen a little bit more comfortable on that drop down. Gets the pass on to Scrapie. Papu looking for the potential as well, but won't be able to find it just yet. Gwen and Scrapie definitely having a lot of back and forth throughout this track, but going into the icy banks here, it's going to be Scrapie doing what he does best again. And as you can see here, out of it, it is going to be Scrapie with the potential lead here. Gwen, though, able to hold on to it. Scrapie, he had just a brief moment there of shakiness coming out of that last one, and unfortunately, it will be the difference between 2nd and 4th for him. Lap 5 out of 6 now, though, still very, very close-knit amongst the top 6 here. Anybody's race for the taking, truly, at this point. Papu losing some momentum, though. Tween and Scrapie look for the pass here. Gwen, though, getting a bit of a lead gap, but not too much. It's going to be a very close-knit one as we go into the drop-down here. Papu looking for the pass into first. Tween starting to lose some ground. Scrapie trying to strike back into the top 3. Going into the icy turns here. We'll see if he can make it happen. The first one looking about standard there for Scrapie. We'll see if he can find some recovery time on the second. The second one results in just about the same. Still going to be sitting comfortably in that 4th spot. Tween, though, losing a little bit of ground here around the last couple of turns. Scrapie in the potential position now to make up some ground here going into the final lap. It's going to be a tough one to say the least here for Scrapie to potentially win. Gwen sitting comfortably in that first place spot, but one small mistake and that is enough to shake things up very quickly amongst the top 6. For Scrapie, though, again, it's not necessarily a race he's trying to win. For Scrapie, he will be perfectly content to sit in a top 8 spot comfortably, regardless of where he ends up finishing the race. He wants to make sure that no points are lost. That's really the priority here. Winning is more of a secondary bonus for a lot of these drivers, and that's why you can see Scrapie, he had a moment there where he thought about risking it to go for the win, but right now he's going to take it a little bit more casually and just make sure he keeps things clean and holds on to a top 8 position. I like this approach from Scrapie, not getting too overzealous and too risky when he's in a position where he doesn't have to do that. As we can see, Scrapie around the ice banks does manage to lose a little bit of ground, but that's not going to matter because the race is over. 6th place for him here on this one. Not quite as high as he may have hoped, but the important thing here is he gets a top 8 placement and keeps a hold of all those points and gains some extra with it as well. So definitely not a bad placement overall for Scrapie to be going into the final 2. The real question is, as we go into the danger zone, will he be able to hold on to his points for the day? That's really the big test now for Scrapie. He's in a great position, but he needs to be able to hold on to it here. Currently in 5th place overall for the day, but these last 2 races matter more than the other 4 combined. So it's really going to be a tough one here for a lot of these drivers. The pressure going to be at its peak, because one bad race in these final 2 can completely take away all of the progress you've made throughout the day here. So it's going to be up to Scrapie to close it out confidently to finish out our day. We are going to have a few minutes of break here before we go into these final 2. They usually do about a 5-minute pause to give everybody a moment to get composed, get mentally focused, and ready for these last 2 races, just because they matter oh so much in the overall leaderboard positions for these drivers at the end of the day. It'll be interesting to see if Carl Jr. will find a way to come out on top again, or if we'll see a new first place driver in the overall standings here at the end of the day. Currently, Carl Jr., though, is in the lead here, going into the final 2 races at 55 points. Gwen and Mutta at 39 and 38 respectively. Tween at 32. Scrapie currently 5th with 29, and Arl and 6th with 28. Meanwhile, looking at the back of the pack, both Pack and Spam did, I believe, hit a points deduction of half in one of the last 2 races. So unfortunately, a bit of a setback for those drivers. But now, going into the final 2 here, there's ample time for any driver really to recover here. And these last 2 ones especially are going to be where the pressure is at its peak for each step here in the TMGL. If you guys are just tuning in, though, be sure to follow the channel if you haven't, to stay up to date with our coverage here through Scrapie's perspective and his journey in the TMGL 2021 season. Overall, though, it is going to be quite an interesting one to see unfold here. We're going to be going into slalom next for race number 5 on the day. Scrapie with 29 points to hold on to. And if he finds top 8s in both of these final races, it's potentially around a 40-point or more day for him, which should move him up in the overall leaderboards, but it's going to be a tough one to hold on to. All of these drivers have really prepared for these 2 races more than anything. Carl Jr., though, I would say right now has the biggest implications on the overall leaderboards if he somehow does not hold on to these 55 points that he's currently maintained on the day. If Carl loses all of those points, it's really anybody's day to take away at that point, because all the way from Arl to Gwen, it's only about a 10-point difference. So any one of these drivers with the potential to win the day if Carl can't hold on to a top 8 in these final 2 races. But Carl, as we've said throughout, one of the more consistent drivers in the TMGL, so it's going to be hard for him to give that up. It always seems like Carl, right at the last minute, is able to pull out some big top 8 finishes for himself when he needs them. So I wouldn't count on Carl going down. I think for a lot of these drivers, it's just going to be making sure they do what they need to make sure they secure a top 8 finish for themselves, because at the end of the day, making that top 8 at the end of the season is the ultimate goal. And if you are Scrapie in this position, it's all about just hitting that top 8. Winning a race isn't a huge deal at this point. If he can find a way to maintain and hold these points, that's going to be the crucial thing for Scrapie to do today. Just about 3 minutes, though, from hopping into the action here on our final 2 races. Slalom going to be the 5th track of the day. It's going to be a tough one for a lot of these drivers. I think there's a lot of room for error on this map, especially on this icy bank hill. It's a tough one to consistently maintain time through, and there's just so many potential errors that can be made on it that I think that's going to be one of the key factors of this map in determining the success of all these drivers. As we hop on, though, with Scrapie just getting warmed up here, we'll see how he fares in his practice laps around it. As you can see, going a little bit too high and wide there. And just one mistake like that in the live race can cost you so much time and momentum. We're talking about one turn like that Scrapie just had. That could ultimately cost you the difference between a top 8 and a bottom 8. So It's going to be a tough one here for all of these drivers because one small mistake can cost them all of their points for the entire day to go against them. So right now, I think the biggest opportunity is going to be just maintaining that consistency. Even if Scrapie has to go a little bit slower, if he doesn't make any major mistakes, there should be a top 8 in his future here. As we can see though, on the clock, just about 2 minutes of warm-up left to go before the final 2 races get underway. It's going to be a tough one for all of these drivers, but still, we'll see if Scrapie has what it takes. He's definitely in need of a big day here to get some big points up on the board, and I think if he could have a big day here, it's really going to put him in a great position for the rest of the season as well, because all it really takes in the steps is, I would say, 2 really strong weeks is all you need to secure yourself into the overall top 8. As we can see though, Scrapie starting to get pretty comfortable on this one. It's going to be a tough race though. Carl Jr. though, the one to keep your eyes on in this race. A bottom 8 for Carl Jr. completely changes everything on the overall leaderboards, not only for the day, but in the overall standings. It could potentially block him from holding on to the lead as well. Just about 30 seconds from kicking this one off. Scrapie just continuing to get comfortable on this one. This uphill turn though, that is going to be the one to watch out for. If he can hit everyone like he did on this last run just now, he's going to be in a pretty decent spot. But as we've seen all of these drivers in warm-up, they've had some shaky moments on that turn as well, and I think for everyone, that's the spot they're most looking out for here on slalom. That uphill ice turn is just a potentially devastating place for a lot of these drivers. But now here we go into the danger zone, guys. The last 2 races of the day. The bottom 8 drivers will lose all of their points, no matter how many they have here. And this is where it's all on the line for all of these drivers. Hopping into it with Scrapie to kick us off. Gwen, though, in an early lead, but Scrapie maintaining a competitive momentum himself here to stay amongst the top 8. Starting this one off, Carl Jr. slips early into the back of the pack. Definitely some dangerous implications from that one for his points total, but Scrapie not in the safety zone himself here. 8th place, the target on his back. And unfortunately for him, he actually slips around that last turn into about 9th. Not a place where he can feel comfortable just yet. Going into the first turn here, this is where all of the drivers have to bring their A game. You could see already 3 drivers making mistakes on the turn the first time around, and it just goes to show you how much of a crucial point of this map that turn is going to be. Every driver that made the mistake there puts themselves into the bottom 3. Papu basically down and out of this one too. He cost himself 9 full seconds in a reset there. Scrapie though, looking for the recovery on this one. Not a safe spot to be in at all for himself here. But if he can just have a smooth go of it around that icy turn each time, he still should be in a position to finish in the top 8, because everybody who makes a mistake on that turn are going to be the first ones to slip out of that top 8. You can see here the pressure at its peak for a lot of these drivers. This is where the practice truly has to show. Going into this turn once again, it's going to be Scrapie, taking it a little bit slower, but making sure he's in a comfortable position to hold on to his momentum here, and that's exactly what he needed to do here. Doesn't want to risk going completely down and out, and now he can use the rest of the track here to try and recover some of that lost time. And I like this approach a lot from Scrapie. He's not doing anything too risky because he knows how much worse falling down in that ice section can be compared to some of these other points in the track. And the big thing now, though, is he has to find ways throughout the middle of the track to recover his time, and as you can see, he's definitely doing just that right now. Moving up into 8th position from 12th. Not comfortably in that 8th, though. He still has to be careful in order to try and hold on to it, because there are so many drivers that are just as equally in need of holding on to that 8th position as Scrapie is here. And of course, the driver right behind him is going to be Carl Jr. as well, who is someone who is in great need of holding on to his position with 55 points in total. As you can see, going into the finish line, it is going to be Scrapie falling down a little bit, again taking it safe on that icy turn, and now looking to the mid-lap area to recover his time. 9th place, though, definitely not a safe spot for him to be in at this moment. 9th would be such a devastating way to go down here in the 5th track of the day, and he's going to have to put his best foot forward to try and hold on to a better position. We're already about halfway done, though, and these middle drivers in the pack are so neck and neck here. There's really no clear indicator as to who could potentially take this one away and who may lose it all here on track number 5. We're just about halfway here through this race as well, and Scrapie is definitely in a dangerous spot right now and potentially could risk losing all of his points, but he still has to be cautious around the icy turns. Any big errors here will cost any one of these drivers so much. Going into the finish line here, 2 laps remaining. Scrapie still in the back end of the top 10 here, looking for recovery now in the final 2 laps. Going to be sitting in 9th position, looking for the pass here onto Arl. He's going to be able to find it. Keeping the momentum on his side is going to be key now as he works his way into the top 8. Carl Jr. and Affy both within striking distance as well. Bren up in that middle of the pack, it looks like, as well. And here it comes. Scrapie looking for an even better position than he has right now. He knows 8th is too much of a risk to try and hold on to. One last-minute pass is all it's going to take for him to lose everything. As we go into the main section here, this is going to be the key decisive factor for a lot of these drivers. These last 2 run-throughs on the ice could be the difference between top 8 and bottom 8 for Scrapie. And that could just be it here, guys. Scrapie, unfortunately, going to make a big error there on the turn, and I think that may just be it for him on this one. About 4 seconds off the top 8, pretty much no room to recover here. And that is unfortunately going to be a points reset situation for Scrapie here on race number 5. Very unlikely that he will find his way into the top 8 unless everybody in front of him has some errors that give him the chance to pass here. It's not to say it's impossible, but it is very unlikely at this point to see a top 8 finish, just considering the gap between Scrapie and Tween here. Who knows, though? Maybe in the final turn we'll see a lot of mistakes come through, but right now it's not looking too good here for Scrapie in race number 5 on the day. Here we have it, going into the final run-through on the ice. It's going to be a close one amongst the top 8, but unfortunately for Scrapie, there is not going to be a positive end to this one. He's going to be in the bottom 8 here and will hit that points reset and be completely zeroed out, along with several drivers that were close to the front as well. Tween, Scrapie, Kappa, and Gwen all losing a hefty number of points here in race number 5. Meanwhile, though, Carl Jr. is still able to capitalize and keep himself out in front. Scrapie now moves down to just 3 points, losing just about 30 there on race number 5. Has to have a big final race here in order to really find some decent points on the day. If he could still get a top 3, it is possible, but now going into the final race, the pressure is on drivers like Carl Jr. and Pack and Mutta, who have accumulated points throughout the whole day, but still have that risk of losing all of them here in the final track of the day. Here we go, though. It is going to be race number 5, guys, coming up in just a few short moments. We'll see if Scrapie can find his way to at least a solid placement here on this final one of the day. There's still a chance to at least put up 15, 20 points on the board with a good placement here in this last race. And now more than ever, Scrapie's going to need that to happen. Carl Jr., though, sitting on 64, Mutta and Pack in a good spot as well. Unfortunately for everybody else, though, they have definitely hit some hard times on their points, especially these 9 through 16 drivers. It's all about these last 2 tracks of the day, though. Scrapie definitely in need of a big performance here. Carl Jr., Mutta, and Pack looking to hold on. We saw Pack go down hard in the final race of week number 1. We'll see if he can hold on this time around. Carl Jr., though, seems to be pretty consistent throughout the day. I'd be surprised if he doesn't hold on to these points right now. If Scrapie could somehow find a win, though, a win is worth 22 points, so there is a potential at the very best for Scrapie to get a 25-point day would be the most he could get out of it, which, to be fair, would probably put him into the top 6 for the day. As we can see, though, 20 seconds of warm-up, and then we will be ready to go. Before we hop right into it, though, a quick shout-out to our partners, Logitech G and XP Sports, for showing some amazing support to us throughout the Trackmania season so far. Right now, though, Scrapie, he's going to need your support here in order to get this one done. The most important race right here starting for the day. Here we go, the final race of the day, race 6 out of 6. We're on switcheroo here to decide the fate of Scrapie and the overall points for the day. He needs a fantastic finish here in order to salvage the day after losing all of his points in race number 5 there. Starting this one off, Scrapie currently around that 5th, 6th position, but still, it is so neck and neck here around the first couple of turns. It's hard to tell where things may settle. Right now, though, Scrapie just continuing to claw away at the leaderboard here. Just needs to keep the momentum on his side. Currently sliding into the top 4, but it's not a safe spot to be just yet. About 10 out of the 16 drivers are neck and neck here, vying for that first place position, especially these drivers who lost all of their points in the previous race. When you're in that kind of position, you really have nothing to lose here going into the final race. It's a make it or break it moment for Scrapie here. He's going to have to bring everything he's got in this track. As we can see, Scrapie settling into the top 4 here. Not a bad spot to be at all. Papu and Pack out in front of him. Yvonne neck and neck as well. Around that last turn, though, Massa gets a good momentum boost, but still, Scrapie able to swing right back into the top 3. Papu and Pack, though, still out in front. You can see a lot of these drivers that have a ton of points, though, not comfortably in the position that Scrapie is in at the moment. So still, there is going to be a decent chance, but I'm not sure what happened there. Maybe a disconnection. Yeah, I'm not actually sure what happened there. I think we had a disconnection potentially from one of the drivers there, so there is going to be a restart to the map. Unfortunately for Scrapie, I mean, he was in a great position before the restart, so that's going to be a bit of a bummer if he's not able to have the clean start that he had in that first run-through. So it is going to be Scrapie having to go into reset. He had a top 3 to kick it off, but it's not to say he couldn't do even better this next run through. We'll see exactly what's in store for Scrapie. You can see just during the pause time here, going to be maintaining some warm-up here just to make sure he's ready to go as soon as the pause is lifted. Bit of an unfortunate one, though, for Scrapie. Won't know how that one would have went, but we'll see how it goes this time around. Scrapie definitely still with that ultimate potential to have a clean start here and get this one going, but it is going to be a pause here, and I believe a complete restart of map number 6 due to a disconnection there, I believe, from Mutta at the beginning of the race. But that just goes to show you how important this final race is. I mean, if Mutta DC'd there and they didn't restart the race, he would essentially go from second place to potentially last place for the entire day. So definitely glad they're giving him at least that opportunity to get back in here and get this one restarted, since, you know, one DC could cost you the season potentially if it happens in the last 2 races. Scrapie, though, currently sitting in 13th. Obviously not the key position he'd like to be in at the moment, but with how this last one could go, a lot of potential here for him to claw back if he can have a good placement in this final race. As we can see here, though, still waiting on all of the drivers to get back into the lobby. Everybody else just trying to stay warm at the moment, since they know how much value can be obtained from doing well in this final race. More importantly, though, for these drivers out in front, how much can be lost off of their overall points totals as well. If you guys are just tuning in, had a disconnection here on race number 6, so we're just going to be taking a quick moment while everybody gets reconnected, and then we'll be right back into it. Not looking to have too much of a pause, just Mutta had a disconnection there at the start here of race number 6, but once he gets that resolved, we'll be back into it to see the conclusion here of step number 2. Scrapie currently overall 6th, and on the day 13th. Looks like they are starting to potentially get ready for a reset here. It looks like Mutta is back in the lobby as well, so not quite sure what they're waiting on at this point. Should be in just shortly here, though. All right, here we go. It's going to be the final race of the day. Here we go. It's going to be kicked off. And Scrapie looking to have another big statement to start the race once again. As you can see at the start of the race, it's actually going to be Gwen out in front early this time. Scrapie still right about the same position as he kicked it off in the first one, vying for that middle of the pack, working to try and get his way into an early top 4 again. Right now, though, it is all over the place for many of these drivers here to start it off. Scrapie still within the top 8, but not comfortable enough just yet. Not quite the best start compared to last time. He's a little bit behind on his time, but nothing too crazy in terms of the overall difference here. Going into the drop-down turns here, it's going to be Scrapie losing a little bit of ground, but not too much here. He's going to be on the backside of the top 8 now as he goes out of this section. Scrapie, though, this is one of the tracks he put in a ton of time to work on all of the opportunities to see where he could recover time and really put his best times on the table here. So this is definitely one I could see Scrapie being a top 8 finisher on if he doesn't have any major mistakes. Right now, though, that position is not too comfortable just yet. Scrapie, while he has seen himself in the top 8 several times, he's currently fighting very closely for that position. It's so close right now, it's hard to tell. These drivers just shifting back and forth around every single turn here. Scrapie right around that 8th through 10th position here. Going into the drop-down turns, he's trying to make up some time here. We'll see if his strategy is able to pull him through to a stronger position around the turns. So far, though, it doesn't really seem to be the case. It's roughly about the same as Scrapie sits right around 10th position. Scrapie needing a little bit more out of this one to find his way into a good potential finish. Unfortunately, his current position won't really cut it. However, the distance between him and first is not too far at the moment, so there is potential recovery in store. Scrapie with the pass there moves into 10th. Now is looking for some points to hold on to. Right now, though, the scariest thing is a lot of these points leaders are currently out in front. Mutta, unfortunately, going to be down and out of this one and lose those points for himself. Everybody else with high points, though, currently sitting in the top 8. Definitely some strong implications on the overall standings if none of that changes. Scrapie, though, around the last few turns, manages to work himself into the back end of the top 8 here, and potentially within striking distance now of a decent placement. You can see the speed he was able to maintain in this last lap on 4 out of 6 now. Looking pretty clean here. Scrapie, though, he wants to do even more than that. He knows just an 8th place isn't going to be enough points to provide the necessary impact he needs on the overall leaderboards. So he's still going for more here. As you can see, though, around that last turn, just a hair of momentum is going to be lost here. The overall standings flipping back and forth, though, very rapidly. Nobody comfortable and nobody safe just yet. Currently about halfway, though, through this race. Scrapie trying to maintain that top 8 position, but he is in a very difficult spot to do that here, fighting aggressively amongst the back end of the top 8 here. Papu looking for the pass here, but it's still anybody's to take away. And at this point, it's Scrapie just looking for every point value he can grab. Only 2 laps left to make it happen, and he's currently in that 9th position, just behind Papu in 8th. Scrapie needing these 2 laps to be extremely impactful for himself. Unfortunately, not sitting in the best position. Right now, though, with pressure at its peak, Scrapie just needs 1 pass to hold on to at least a tad of points for today. We'll see if he can find it. The pressure is on. Papu, though, makes a big mistake on the drop down, loses a bit of time there. Now Scrapie's back in the top 8. Final lap, though, Scrapie needs even more than this to make the impact. Moves into 7th, but he's looking for more here. We'll see what Scrapie can find here in the final lap. It's going to be a tough one. Currently in 8th position, just looking to, at the bare minimum, hold on to a top 8 finish. But ideally, he needs just a bit more than that to find a way to have a confident finish in points for the day. Currently sitting at only 3 points to hold on to here in 7th position, trading now back to 8th overall. Not a great spot to be, but still, if he can hold the points, he'll be at least a little bit happier. Scrapie, though, in this final lap, he is out for blood here, looking for more on the drop-down section here, gets the pass into 7th, gets the pass into 6th here, potentially. And he's going for it here. He's going to try and do everything he can in this final lap to make the difference known, and he actually is able to pick up, I believe, an extra spot or 2 there at the end. We'll see where it all comes down to on the final placements, but I think Scrapie just barely able to hold on to a top 8 there. He will manage it, and when it's all said and done, he does finish right around that 8th position, so definitely a big race for Scrapie to hold on to. Doesn't lose all of his points, but to be fair, a lot of these guys put up some massive points on the day, though. So Scrapie does manage to swing his way back from the bottom up into 8th position for the day. Not necessarily the worst place in the world to be. Unfortunately, though, there was a lot of big wins on the day. You see Carl Jr. now sitting at 151 points, massively in the lead compared to anyone else now. Pac, Arl, and Tween all in good standing as well. Scrapie currently moves down to that 10th position overall. Definitely within striking distance of fighting his way back into the top 8, but Carl Jr. just sitting on a massive set of points here and showing his consistency to be his strength here so far in this season. So overall, Scrapie does manage to pick up a few points, but unfortunately race number 5 being a huge impact on his overall chance. Had he not lost those points on race number 5, he would have been right around 4th place overall. So I'm sure he's going to be disappointed after that one, but still, There's a lot of time left in the season for him to recover. We'll see what Scrapie can do in next week as we do prepare for step number 3 to see what Scrapie can do to recover the season here. But guys, that is going to be where we leave this one for today. A quick shout out before we go to our sponsors here, Logitech G and XP Sports. Be sure to check them both out as well. And guys, it's been a pleasure to be with you once again. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Be sure to follow Scrapie's channel here if you haven't, to stay up to date with his streams as well as our TMGL streams every week for each and every step as well. But that's where we're going to leave it for today, guys. Appreciate everybody tuning in, and have a great rest of your weekend. Thanks, everybody.
Wow.